Welcome back, everybody. Thank you for a very short and eclipsed time of addressing so many questions. We were following the, uh, the list of responses, and it was extraordinary to see how much people were talking about. So here are a couple of the highlights that we've picked up from your breakout room activity. And the first one is important to note is that Deputy Rory from OEM noted as he was reading through a lot of the responses as well, how highly reliant OEM is on community organizations, community leaders, uh, communicating directly to uh, the emergency management entities to make sure that it's understood who is in the most need and where are they. So, in looking at the questions about what kind of models there are and what kind of existing structures there are in the community that could be leveraged and used, there was a lot of discussion about that. And it looked at some of the things that people wrote is a lot of people know each other in the neighborhood. So you just need some sort of way to connect them as if there was, a mechanism, a platform, an organization, a partnership, a collaborative. This is something that we're going to talk about in a few minutes. Is it possible to envision that kind of an entity to connect people? Others said that there are a lot of existing networks in the community that can be utilized and capitalized upon. Some people noted that there's almost a Venn diagram of overlapping networks of community and government organizations, and that, by the way, is borne out by the network analysis that we've done and that Alexis reported on earlier. One person said there's a need for a neutral organization uh, to be this entity that might serve to link people together. Other folks said that it would help to have the higher ground organizations who may be less impacted by the immediate flooding to step forward and be able to take the lead on a lot of activity. There was at least one person who noted a concern that in a time of scarce resources, it's possible that local leaders, at least this was their concern, or the perception that local leaders might take care of themselves and their families first. So obviously there would be an issue of trust that would be an important one for people to address. When we asked about what are the best coordination mechanisms, a lot of people talked about the Emergency Operations Center, which is the formal coordination mechanism that will be run by Boston Office of Emergency Management, looking to the legitimate organizations that already exist in the community. People mentioned East Boston Neighborhood Health and the Boston Public Health Commission by name. Some folks referenced the Chelsea Food Network that has arisen particularly recently, and I think Phil may speak to that in a moment as well. And then around the question of the undocumented, there were a number of responses to that, most of which prefaced it by saying that people who are undocumented tend to be very protected in Massachusetts, that the people in East Boston tend to be very tolerant. They don't care about documentation. But some did note that during COVID-19, those who are undocumented were unwilling to step forward and apply for benefits that they would otherwise be eligible for. So those were some of the highlights that I noted. I would ask whether any of my uh, co-panelists from the breakout room, Alexis, Phil, Deputy Rory, if you had anything that you wanted to add to that before we move to what is essentially the final discussion.
I think I might, and I picked this up from Deputy Roy, who could speak more to it, but any event that affects East Boston in this manner will also be affecting other parts of the city, low-lying neighborhoods. So certainly South Boston, the North End will be affected. Lots of people will be calling for attention in lots of different places. And I think David said this was what happened after events he's seen, Hurricane Katrina, where one doesn't expect these things. All of a sudden it's then worse than we've planned for. So we can't expect everybody to helicopter in and then save us. I think some of the comments people were making earlier about we know each other, how do we help our neighbors? We heard some of these comments from Rich Serino, like it's the whole community approach. So how do we develop that? How do we move to that? I think is important. More later.
Great. And I see at least one person noted to me privately on a direct message that the Massachusetts VOAD, the voluntary organized uh, for disasters, is and can be the neutral organization to help. So that certainly is a possibility. Um, so at this point, Deputy Roy, did you have anything that you wanted to add to this before we moved on?
Nope.
Okay. So Phil, I'm actually going to turn it over to you to take us through maybe a consideration of what are the opportunities for action that present themselves to us now at the end of this assembly.